Hi, and welcome to Celebration Bar Review. In today's message, I want to talk about something that's really very important and serious in the concept of how we teach students to prepare for the bar exam. But it also has application, I think, in broader context. And if you're watching and taking another kind of a test or thinking about studying, this may be helpful for you as well. I've titled this message, at least tentatively, the Binge and Purge Learning Method versus Spaced Education. Now, you might think, wow, that's a little tasteless. Binge and purge. Are we talking about bulimia and anorexia? And the answer is no, and I'm not trying to minimize those concerns at all. What I am describing here is a traditional learning style that really has been in vogue for many, many years. Many of you who are taking the bar exam, if you're over the age of probably 30 or definitely if you're over the age of 40, you were almost certainly trained in the United States in your K-12 education, probably in your college education, likely also in your law school education, under this idea of binge and purge. So let me describe it first and then explain why I don't think it works and what we try to do differently. It's really, as it sounds, binge and purge. Essentially what happens is that in this methodology, the student is told to binge on as much information as they can. Take as much information from whatever source, whether it's the professor, the teacher, the reading, the lectures, the outside study, whatever it might be. Gather that information, and in law school that was often gather the information about the rules or the elements or whatever it might be. Store up all of that information. And then on test day, which usually came at midterm or the end of the semester, you would purge whatever you had learned. In other words, you just, some people even talk about vomiting on the paper, throwing up on the paper, throwing a lot of stuff out on the assignment that they're writing. And today when people are able to type answers and have enormous speed in their word processing skills, you can put a lot of information out in a timed exam. And if you've got a take-home test or an untimed exam, you could go crazy. Where did this method or system come about? Well, essentially, it's a throwback to the industrial age. When we wanted students to learn how to fit into an industrial model, work on the assembly line model, it was not at all unusual to suggest that what they had to do was to get in information and then give back outputs. So you had inputs and outputs, and they should essentially meet each other. It was an efficient way to teach a large number of people when they were working essentially in a fixed from here to here kind of job, and that's what they were doing. Now, obviously, as our economy and as the world has changed, and we've gone to a more information-based, collaborative economy, collaborative world, the opportunity for someone to work in isolation and to just do their small task is probably become much less important. Now, how does that affect a lawyer or a law student? Well, in the days in which a lawyer simply memorized rules and then purged them out on the exam, that probably was an efficient way to learn and an efficient way to show what you had learned, certainly on a bar exam or a law school test, because out in the real world that you were going to be going into, it was important to know the rules and to be able to apply them and put them out there. You didn't have resources like Google, LexisNexis, Westlaw, whatever, that's out there and makes it possible today to access almost any piece of information virtually instantly. As a result, the binge and purge methodology becomes somewhat antiquated and outdated, certainly for our use. Now, in the broader educational context, this also has meaning because as scientists began to study this and teachers began to study and work with scientists and brain researchers, we started seeing people like Howard Gardner at Harvard, who you've heard me mention before, with Project Zero, which was multiple intelligences and a way of thinking about learning. There was information even on the other end of the political spectrum from Clyde Christensen talking about disruptive educational theories in schools. You started to see a backlash to the idea that was at one time very much in vogue, that there were 500 facts that you needed to know. And if you knew those 500 facts, you could get all the way through life or all the way through school. In many ways, what we've done is to return to a more primitive society, if you will, a Socratic world in which we have a dialogue, in which the learner actually engages with the teacher or professor and begins to discover truths for themselves, that Socratic from Socrates and Plato. And so we've got these competing theories of how to learn that are out there. Now, one of the things that's come along in the last 15 years or so, but certainly in the last 5, is that we now have this functional magnetic resonance, or MRI, a functional MRI. And functional MRIs are being used in a lot of psychology and brain experiments to help pinpoint parts of the brain that are operating at different times. And from that, there are some interesting hypotheses about what the brain is doing or not doing. Now, I want to be clear. This is not pop science. This is still developing information. It's still developing methodology. But there is a growing body of literature among those that do this work that confirms what teachers in classrooms have said for decades, eons really. And that is that when you ask a student to essentially binge on information and then purge it back, there's very little retained learning. And I think that you could think about that in your own life and probably see where that comes in, that you studied or crammed for a test at whatever level, took the test, and then you were done, and you don't remember the information, you don't recall the information, you got it out of your system, just like a bad cold, and it's gone, and you never want to see it again. Now, the difference between that and realistic or authentic evaluation is that authentic evaluation tends to stay with you. It's based in the real world. Tends to be more collaborative, more group-oriented, more project-based, drawing on a variety of skills, not just the rules or the law or the material that you've memorized, but really drawing on your common sense, your practical experience, your ability to relate to others, your ability to draw from disparate disciplines and put all of that together. And I think if you ask someone to describe the work that a lawyer does today, they would be more inclined to tell you that it's like that second model. It's really bringing together a variety of skills, communication skills, mediation skills, management skills, drawing on experts in certain areas where perhaps the lawyer doesn't have particular expertise, managing the client, communicating to other parties, persuading a judge or a jury, but really not so much in terms of just learning the rules and spitting them back. All right, so what does that mean for the bar exam? Well, when we sat down to create the bar review 20-some years ago, and it was really built on theories that started even earlier than that at Harvard Law School, the theory was very much built on this idea of binge and purge. Put as much information into the student's brain as you could, get them to spit it back out, and see what result you ended up with. Over time, as I began to become more involved in bar review, I took the lessons I had learned in the K-12 environment, doing the work at Celebration School, working with Harvard and Johns Hopkins, Stetson University, Auburn, the Walt Disney Company, a private company that was very good at how they taught, and the public school system. And what I discovered was that the kinds of results that we were seeing from our K-12 students using not purge and binge and purge, I can't even say it right, but spaced education, learning in smaller chunks in a Socratic dialogue over time with feedback and collaborative learning and some of these other skills seemed to be working. Our students were doing well. Well, one of the beauties of getting old or older is that many of those little kids, students, are now in their professions. They've actually not only graduated high school, they've graduated college and graduate school. Many are working as lawyers, many are working as educators. There are some doctors, there are some rocket scientists, there are people engaged in all sorts of activities, lots of moms and dads and people doing wonderful things. And when I went back and tracked some of the activities and behaviors of these students that we worked with, though it's not a formal longitudinal study, I can tell you that these students seem to have done very, very well in life and in the professions and careers that they chose, regardless of what that career was, whether it was very scientific in math and science, or it was in the humanities or the liberal arts, in religion, theology, teaching, whatever it turned out to be, they were incredibly successful. Well, I think one of the reasons for that success is that they were learning a different style of education. We were giving them something other than the traditional assembly line education. All right, so when we move into the bar exam, what I think begins to happen is that we have, over the last 5 to 10 years, started to really re-examine how we do bar review. And so in this course, if you're taking our course, what you're going to discover is that we use this idea of spaced education and neuro-linguistic programming, which is essentially getting you involved on a visceral, emotional, physical level with your studies, not just a mental, dispassionate, set-apart way. We do that by having you do a very quick reading of basic material in a subject, and we do that just to get that information into your preconscious brain. It's not a detailed read, it's not there to help you learn all the rules and the law. Then I activate that material with a very specifically designed lecture that is built on a neuro-linguistic programming basis to help activate or bring that material into the forefront of your mind. The lecture is designed to take what you quickly skimmed and give it more body and life. And we do that through context, through stories and examples, through ways of bringing the material into a more real perspective than just abstraction or pure knowledge. Then, importantly, we go to a third step, which is to further activate the material through the use of practice questions and feedback. Now, if it's a multiple choice exam like the MBE, you're going to be doing practice MBE questions, but unlike a course in which you do a whole lot of questions and then look at the answers when you're done, we have you do a question, stop, review the answer choices and the explanation, and then go to the next question. And those questions are built one on top of each other to help you with that spaced learning. If you're doing essay writing, the goal is to have you write in those subjects and then review your work, create a schematic of that work, if you will, or a mind map, or what I call a 4-column exercise, to help reactivate the material again. And then we compress that learning over time. You go back to those subjects, again, let's say the first time you touch a subject like evidence, you'll come back to it again in 4 weeks. You'll do the same kind of work with new material in evidence, and then you'll wait about 2 weeks and you'll do more material and evidence, and then you'll wait about 6 days and you'll do more, and then you'll wait another couple of days and do more. So we're compressing the touches, and it's called spaced learning or spaced education. Now, this approach to education builds on context much more than it builds on memorization. And because of that, it can be very uncomfortable when you start out. It can be very unsettling because you're not just absorbing and gulping in lots of information and hoping to hold it in your mind until the exam. In fact, we're telling you specifically, don't memorize. Simply get acquainted with the material, jump in, use it in context, begin to activate it. And as you get to the exam, when you see questions and problems in these areas, you will be activating those same neural pathways, those same functional MRIs are showing us the Christmas tree that lights up in your brain, and you're able to start using this material more effectively. Now, there's a lot that's been written about spaced education and about Binge and Purge. One of the best articles in my mind is written by Craig Lambert in the Harvard magazine. You can Google it and take a look at it. It's a very useful article on this idea. There's a lot of research going on, and that's what makes it exciting. It's a different way of learning than what most people learn. And when you come into a course like ours, I will tell you it might be a bit unsettling at first because it's not the way you're used to learning. But it is an extraordinarily successful way to learn and for us to show you this material. And how does it translate when it comes to the bar exam? Well, we continue to have better than average results with a student body, a population, if you will, that should have much worse than average. While we have our share of first-time bar takers, I will say over the last 5 years we've become more known for our ability to take people who failed the bar exam somewhere else and help them get through the test. So working with a disadvantaged population, we have better than state percentages in every jurisdiction that we teach. So I really encourage you to look into this, check it out, and research it. Think about it. I'd love to get your comments and thoughts. If you sign up for one of our free learning assessments, we'll be glad to explain that a little bit further to you in that assessment and to show you how that spaced education idea might work for you. So I hope that's helpful, and I appreciate you watching, and we wish you the best as you study for your bar exam or whatever test is coming up.